I'm Nicholas Muellner. I'm a photographer and writer, as well as a publisher of the Image Text Ithaca Press, which is associated with the Image Text graduate program at Ithaca College.
We're going to talk about Mike Slack's The Transverse Path today.
One of the things that attracts me to Mike's work is its kind of resistance to language, which makes it a little bit paradoxically not the easiest thing to talk about. This is a picture that really resonates across the book for me. I think because the way it insists on surface, the way it insists on a kind of simplicity, it's not a very complicated picture on one level. It's just the surface of the water and a reflection of sky. But you see these, what feels like the material presence of winds moving in different directions across the surface, whether that's real or not. That sense of unseen forces, which to me is what animates this whole book more than any other singular set of, say, relations, cultural or otherwise. It sort of feels like this is a map of what we're encountering in this book.
Mm-hmm. And it's also kind of a map of how one encounters photographs in real life. When you see an image, you often see the surface of it and its materiality, even if that's not something we can sense when watching a YouTube video flip through.
Right. That's a really interesting sequence to me, in that the first image of those three sets up this sense of possibilities or portals, maybe, that may or may not be transmissible or traversable, actually, is much better the word for this book. I don't know where I can and can't enter, and that talks about where I can and can't enter the image and where I can and can't enter the landscape, I think. And then going from that to those also three views that are flattened and then have only the illusion of depth, which sort of takes the potential illusion of the first image and makes it really physical and obvious, the limitation.
I love this set of images too. If we've been thinking about surface of photographs in some of the previous images, now all of a sudden we're thinking about the surface of the book because the gutter lines up right with where we think there's a hinge. And again, I'm not quite sure what's real, or where we can transverse this image, but it's overlaid and mirrored on the book. I love it.
Yeah, it's a nice, surprising use of the spread also. I like this image because there is this sort of repeated trope of a sort of relationship between the man-made and the natural in this book, obviously, that comes up in, most pictures, I'd say, in one way or another. But there's a way in which this picture is both really blunt about that relationship and also really casual about it. It's almost absurd. Mm-hmm. It's so overstated. The placement of this object into this space, even though it feels actually totally plausibly found to me. It's really humorous, this picture, to me, in a way that lets the wind out of the seriousness of the question while also pushing it to its limit at the same time. I do love this image for a second, though, the circle. Yep. There's something so theatrical about this image. I mean, it really is spotlight, center stage spotlight, soliloquy lighting or something for this collection of debris that is only sort of brought together as a formal composition by the circle of light that is dropped on it. And there's something about how that represents the idea of attention that photography produces, the idea that you frame out a tiny piece of the world and you make us look at it, and that's the drama of photography, which is both empty and an illusion and arbitrary, which we see by the edges and see how we can see what's in shadow as well, but also still compelling. I can't help but be compelled by what's inside that frame. I mean, that image is always just ridiculously pretty.
Yeah.
In a way that I can't help but love. It's sort of these moments where in this book where something is so ridiculously sort of ravishing like the extravagance of photography, color, light, effect of light and color. Like we see the sort of seductive transformation of the image. And there's no attempt to hide it, and there's no attempt to metaphorize it. It's just there. Feels like it's so rare that we allow ourselves to indulge in sensation without meaning in art and in photography.
Yeah.
And this image of the roof, just to pause for a second.
I love this one.
I love that image. It's so simple and yet so weird. Mm-hmm. And I can just look at it over and over again. It's a little bit like one of those weird magic eye images, in that like your sense of perspective and of scale.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to describe it. It's, it sometimes makes complete sense, and sometimes it's like a word you say over and over again. You can't believe it was ever spelled like that to start with.
So maybe talk about these three images in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The cherubs with their backs to us, and then that flash of light in that landscape, and then this image of the yellow flowers
mm-hmm.
that have taken a natural form that seems, again, almost like a digitally created symmetry, and like has it piercing up through that dense cloud reflection. Like these three images, how they conflate like human ideas, like, I don't know, heaven or the sort of the divine, and light, and like perfection and imperfection in this sort of jumble. Like the image of the like lawn cherubs with its back to us is so compromised and messy and strange and hard at first to even understand what that is, even though it's about this sort of like celestial or unearthly beings.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to that ray of that incredible spot of light, which is so beautiful. That also feels like beyond the human or beyond the natural, and yet coming from nature. And then this image is, to me, like probably the most ridiculously sort of ravishing image in the whole book. And there's something also destabilizing about the relationship between like down and up, between like the heavenly and the terrestrial. It's like the mirror opposite of that cherub's image in a way.
Yeah, I think if there's going to be a lesson in it, it's that the otherworldly or the celestial is already here, but that we don't have to remake it. And when we do, it ruins it.
Or we remake it. I mean, it's already here because we made up our image of that thing from what's actually already here also.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience of this book with me.
Sure. It was fun. Thank you for asking me.